Hello.
Hi. All right. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay. There's with these two cases this week, I think DaVita Healthcare is probably the most complex case we'll do all semester. And I'll give you some tips on how to tackle that. And then Intuit Project Agranova, I love this one. This one I really like, and I love what they're trying to do, and I think it's interesting. So we'll get going. But first, some good news. No spreadsheets this week. No spreadsheet work. Now you can do it for those of you that love it. You can, I'm sure, create some, but no more spreadsheets for this week. You do need to use data in your group, in your case analysis and your group assignments, but really no extra spreadsheet, just cite data. So I'm sure you're all excited about that. Well, let's start. So I've been thinking about this, and I had an experience. We're looking at hiring some help outside the United States for my business. And I asked this company that's going to furnish these workers outside the United States why they don't use workers in here in the US. And they said, kindly, and they're based, actually, their headquarters is based in the US, but they work in Mexico. They have workers in Mexico, the Philippines, and I forget the other, I want to say Puerto or Dominican Republic, but for us, I asked, and they said, well, really, the Americans don't work that hard, and they're expensive, and you have to deal with a lot of problems with Americans. Now, obviously, that's a large stereotype. I don't think it's true. All my employees are based here in the US, and I love them. They work hard. But it was interesting to hear that shift, to hear that. And I have a lot of companies that I know that are doing that more and more, going to use employees outside the US, which may be fine. But it made me think, are we settling for mediocrity? And there's a quote from the Wall Street Journal that really hit me earlier this year, an op-ed. Has an era of American mediocrity begun? In January, the College Board announced it would eliminate the essay portion of the SAT, as well as of all of the separate SAT subject tests. Their stated purpose was reducing and simplifying demands on students. So, and then it goes in and talks about we're just not requiring as much, and we're not having high expectations for ourselves. And just thinking about that, and the nice thing is Jesus meets us where we are and wants us to gain exaltation. And President Gordon B. Hinckley said, I want to invite you to walk a higher road of excellence. I plead with you, don't be a scrub, rise to the high ground of excellence. Now, I want to soften that a little bit, because it's virtually impossible to be really good at everything. I will never be good at fashion, and I'm okay with that. I don't think I'll ever be a great race car driver, and I'm okay with that. There's some things that we need to be good at certain times in our lives, like parents. And there's other times that we don't need to be good at certain things in our lives. And I know several students here in this class that don't have the best grades. And a couple of them are okay with that because they're struggling. They're trying to meet other demands right now. And I respect that. And it's a little hypocritical for me to say, but it's okay. I know grades are not a reflection of intelligence. It's usually a reflection of how hard you work. So there's certain things though in our life that we shouldn't settle for mediocrity at all. So there's a couple. This is my 5th grade teacher. Her name is Miss Ellerbrook. And she looked like this. She was really kind, quiet, but intimidating. But she enlivened in me a sense that I could do more, and I was smart. Not that I was smarter than anybody else, because she made our whole class think we were smart, but that I could do some hard things, and I really appreciated that. Nephi, he didn't give up. He didn't settle. He didn't just settle for trying to do, or Lehi tried to settle for remembering what was on the plates just by what they learned. He obtained the plates after failing on 2 other attempts. The people of Ammon, who had a really rough history, but when they were separated, they left and gave up their warring ways. They fully welcomed the Zoramite refugees. Instead of just allowing the refugees to come and just be next to them or give them some land, it says in the scriptures they embraced them, they helped them, they gave them anything they needed for their needs, and warm and lovingly embraced them. And then finally, Jesus. Though Jesus was worried, he spent time to talk with the woman of Samaria at the well. So he gave us that example, and he meets us where we're at and helps us do that next step. And there's a wonderful general conference talk, that 1% better. So in regards to that, creativity. So creativity is a great way that we don't have to settle for mediocrity. And it is a sign of understanding, and business problems require creativity. Probably what you've seen already through these cases. Jesus used creativity in his teachings, and I've shared this with you already several weeks ago, but the parable of the mustard seed, the fig tree, washing the feet of the apostles, how amazing is that? To just start doing that. And he was very creative. Here are some, so now taking it to the carbon 6 rings case that you all just did. So some of the creative answers were bring in Daniel and Heather as partners again. Give them roles. So instead of going and fighting and arguing with them and bring them into court, maybe bring them back into the business. With Red Robin, bring him or her in as a partner or hire as a marketer. Or somebody said, shut down the business. Just, it's not worth it right now. There's a new baby on the way. They want to get through school. John's wife is going to get her law degree in New York. So just shut down the business, which I thought was creative. So going to thoughts on the carbon 6 rings midterm essay. I was really pleased with what you all did. Nearly everyone did much better on this essay than they did on their previous essays. I love the words lazy and deadbeats. And those were the most common words you all used to describe Daniel and Heather. So warning to anybody that works for all of you that aren't working hard, deadbeats and lazy. So I like seeing those come through. The most common reason students lost points. So this semester it wasn't because of the spreadsheet. The most common reason was you didn't use parts of the business model framework to analyze the situation or options. So you pretty much everyone got the options correct and what were the biggest risks, and I liked the recommendations. But what does that mean in the business model framework? How was the go-to-market strategy? How was the customer value proposition? So that will be something to focus on going forward. And we'll talk about that in a moment. In terms of evaluation, so some of you took just you took all the different types of valuation that they had and just averaged them all, which generally is not a good way to do it. It'd be like if you had if you had two Porsches for sale, you had one that was really run down, old, didn't work, that sold for $10,000, and then you had a really nice one that sold for $100,000, and you just say, well, I'm going to average and buy one that's $50,000, so, or $55,000. So you don't necessarily want to just average. It should make sense. Look at the different valuations and then sort of go towards one. So just step back and say, does that make sense? Another thing, my videos help. So hopefully those that aren't online now are watching them. And then also you can reach out to me with questions. And I'm happy to help and walk you through the hints and anything I shared on the videos and answer specific questions. So overall, good job. A couple of assignment tips. So now we're more than halfway through the semester. As we are grading going forward, we are going to be looking, the teaching assistant Chris and I are going to be looking to make sure each of these are included on your assignments. These are the 4 pillars of the course: the business model framework, lean startup principles, manage risks, and then using data to support decisions. These need to be all part of it. So we're going to be grading, I wouldn't say any harder, but we're going to be specifically looking for these and lose points if they're not included going forward, because these are how you do it. And you should think also in your own personal life, what can you do to test some perhaps lean startup principles? I'll tell you an example. A couple of years ago, I lost my voice. It happens every couple of years, and I did, and I lost it for 2 days. I couldn't speak. It just sounded terrible. I just couldn't. And it was really enlightening for 2 days, not speaking, how little I needed to say at home, and things just worked. Things were just fine in my home with me not speaking. So it's kind of funny how that worked. But try little experiments. Try ways of maybe not following up or seeing what happens if you don't do the dishes at night. If you're the one that always does them, will somebody do it? Or if it piles up over 2 or 3 days? What happens if you start reading a general conference talk every day? So these principles are things that we can use in our life. Have you ever looked at your own personal life in a business model type framework and talked about how you're managing your own life? So going back to the assignments going forward, we will be looking for this. And let me share. So I've sent this out, this template, several times. It's just, you might want to go back and look at the reading on this, but this is the template. And then here's an empty template you can use to do the business model framework. But this will help you as you're doing your cases. Okay, so it's kind of fun stuff. One thing I wanted to share, working at 2 tech startups, and I do this when we get in a team meeting in person mainly. But first, I love this quote. At any given time, some significant percentage of people are working on the wrong things in your company. So this is the CEO of Box.com. And most disagreements are a result of miscommunication. As I found that in my marriage, with my children. So what these tech startups do that has been very helpful, I've been involved, is there's these virtual whiteboards you can use, Miro, Jamboard, Lucid, Sparks, and they all have a free version that's pretty easy to use and like a whiteboard. But we would use whiteboards all the time at the tech startups. Go up, and I still remember, it's still in my mind, some of what we use. So whiteboards are a great way to organize your thoughts in your groups, or just, these are what top entrepreneurs do. They organize and document their thoughts. And we would do things like this picture. This is a stock photo, but very similar to this. We would do that. Okay, so let's talk about intrapreneurship. So virtually all companies have this, doing something inside, trying a new business venture inside. So Xbox is a good example within Microsoft, a gaming platform. PlayStation within Sony is another gaming platform. Apple does this a lot recently with a lot of their products. They went from just a computer manufacturer to having all these other technology products. So I think it's really interesting. I worked in Ford Motor Company and Chevron, 2 of the largest companies in the world, and they had a lot of these things going on all the time. So when we're doing this, especially with Project Agrinova, you're going to be asked to do hypothesis testing. So this is part of the lean startup method. So what makes a good hypothesis test? In your assignments, I'm going to be looking at this. Are you able to design, and do a good hypothesis test? What does that mean? It's a very short period of time. For example, like I mentioned, the dishwashing example. If you didn't wash dishes and let them just build up in your sink, would anybody do anything about it in your home? But same thing, short period of time. Otherwise, you start to bring in more variables. You want to focus simply on something small. A limited scope. So you only want to test 1 or 2 things, and you'll see that with Project Agrinova as you read it. You don't want to test a lot of things or have it be too big. Like I remember with the assignment last semester, someone said, well, let's just test to see if farmers were going to use it. Well, that is way too bland, and the scope, you need to be very focused on what you're testing, and then just do it over and over, lots of tests. And then you can a good test is where you can clearly prove the hypothesis is true or false. And you'll see that with Project Agronova. And then use a minimum viable product. What Intuit did, they went and just showed pictures to farmers and what it looked like on a piece of paper. And then sometimes they would use a phone and just show the front of the phone. It didn't even work. And that's all they did was to see if that would work. So with Agronova, they used hours, not months. They used only 12 farmers, 3 Mondays, 2 crops, and 1 agent. And they just used text messages. So they didn't design a huge internet site or a website or a whole back office. They just tried text messages to see what would happen. So this Intuit was a great example of lean startup and hypothesis testing. It's a perfect case for it. So, and by the way, the church does a lot of this too. Now sometimes they need to do it on a longer scale, like Come Follow Me was done on certain wards before they did the Come Follow Me program. Moving to 2 hours of church, they did that in a couple of churches around the world, wards around the world, and branches to see how that would work after a couple of months. Now, they let a couple of months happen, but same thing. They were just testing one separate thing. All right, so DaVita, I think this is a complex case because there's basically 2 things happening, but let's talk about DaVita Healthcare. It started as clinics where people with kidney problems received dialysis. And so what is the main problem? It's trying to solve healthcare professionals are compensated on outcome instead of services. In the United States, at least, we are still mainly, doctors are compensated based on the number of services they give. If I go and get blood tests and it's ordered by the doctor receives money for that. Any x-rays, anything, it's just like a list of services. Where here they wanted to switch to outcome. Are you getting better? Is your broken bone healing? And then they created DaVita RX, or prescription. So provide medication to dialysis patients and no retail pharmacy. And basically they're trying to solve helping their patients follow their treatment and medicine regimens. In the case, I believe it said 28% of their patients that were receiving dialysis actually adhered to the medication plan that was prescribed for them. So that's what they wanted to improve. Obviously, all of this is also trying to get more profit, but they're trying to do the right thing as well. Then we hit Paladina Health, and they're trying to provide primary care at company locations. So this is targeted at large employers. So for example, I worked at Ford Motor Company, and we'd have locations around the world. And some of the location I worked in, let me give a better example. At an auto assembly plant, let's say in Louisville, Kentucky, there's 2,000 workers. And so this would be a perfect place for Paladina Health, where people just during the day can go in, there's a doctor on site and can look and give you a physical or prescribe medication or to order tests. But their focus is, instead of going to an expensive doctor, is trying to get the outcome or have the services focus on the outcome. And it's trying to reduce needless medical procedures while lowering costs. So that's what the 3, so DaVita Healthcare is overall, and then DaVita RX and Paladina Health. So these are the 2 you'll be looking at. And let me show you how to think about this. And I will share this. So when you're going through, one way, I showed you how you can use the business plan model framework, that PowerPoint, but you can also lay it out this way and compare the 2. Because in your assignments, you need to compare what are the lessons learned from DaVita RX that can be transformed over to Paladina. And the best way to do that is to compare each part of the business model framework. So for example, the customer value proposition, help patients follow treatment and medication regimens. They struggled with poor quality of service and negative impact on the dialysis clinics. Here in Paladena, they had access to a personal physician 24/7 and same day, next day appointments. Go to market. This is no retail storefront, and they really focused on fast growth, where this was on-site clinics and focused on showing cost savings. The operation, I won't go in through all of these, I'll skip this part. Profit formula. So, and there are lots of pieces that I left out. So I'll let you can go in and fill the rest. But they had $25 million of original funding for DaVita. And then for Paladena, they were losing money and continuing to lose money by 2013. So leadership here, what were they doing? They wanted to do more hypothesis testing. And this one was more run like a startup. And that's what the leadership did. And they had experience launching and scaling our DaVita RX. So that is one way to keep these straight, is to go down and see what is different and what one can learn, what Paladena can learn from the other. So let me go back to the presentation. Okay, so Project Nova, it's really key to understand who's who in this case. So there's the farmers. They're impoverished and they lack market info. And it sounds like a really rough place to be a farmer. It's really on average, they only have 5 acres they farm on, which is small compared to the US and most places in the world. But the agents, they hold a lot of market information. They have strong relationships. So the farmers sell to the agents. Now the agents actually never take physical possession or maybe even legal possession, but the agents then deal with the wholesalers who are large entities and then sell further down the value chain to maybe grocery stores or companies, etc. So what problem is AgriNova trying to solve? They're trying to increase farmers' incomes by disseminating price and agent contact information to farmers. So the main thing is increase farmers' incomes. That's what they're trying to do, and trying to make this a little more efficient. So I will also send this template out. Here. So one way to do this, so Project Nova is not so much about the business model framework. This one's about understanding lean startup principles and hypothesis testing. But part of that is to know who is who. So we have the AgriNova team, and one thing that they're focused on is finding a big unmet need, solving it well, and then durable competitive advantage. And then there's some information here about each of the different types, or different players. So there's India, the farmers, the agents, wholesalers. Then you can talk about the market, potential products, the competition. And then here's some key questions to answer going through the case. And then the key of all this, the last one, is what hypothesis tests can you put together to help understand if this works? Now, I have the teacher version of the case as well, besides the student version. And in the teacher version, which you don't have, they share a lot of tests that the project leaders did, a lot of small tests. And there were a lot that they did. So there's a lot of opportunities here in this case, but I will share this. This is good just to make sure you're understanding what everyone's interests are, because everyone has different interests here, especially among farmers, agents, and wholesalers. And what can Project AgriNova do to create some kind of product that will help all of them? So I will share this template as well. That will help with that. But the focus is hypothesis testing and lean startup principles. Okay, so, and I love that case. I think it's neat what they're trying to do. So remember the 4 pillars of the case, of this course, and use them in your assignments. Even in the Project AgriNova, you can share what kind of, you can analyze that case using the business model framework. So the group participation grade is going to come out week 14. It's 50 points and it covers 5 group discussions starting last week, week 8 through week 13. And there is, however, week 11, I canceled which is the Thanksgiving week. I canceled the group assignment and discussion. So you're not going to have a group assignment due that week. It's just the 2 case preps for that week. So that will make Thanksgiving a little easier for you all. Remember to switch group leaders every week. And missing a group meeting is a loss of, I should have said 10 points, but it's 10 points, not 8 points. So if the group discussion is so important just to be there and be present. You may do other things outside the case to help, or excuse me, outside the group discussion. But for me, I'm watching to see how you're participating in the group. So that's what those points are full. And then simply uplift your group and be fully present. Even your questions are great and help everyone. So it can be an easy 50 points. Just show up and help your group. So there's an extra credit opportunity this week in 2 days on Thursday. You get 10 points for watching the video and answering the questions, plus an additional 5 points if you're there in person Thursday. There's 2 reasons why we're giving 5 points. One is to incentivize you to come, because it helps me. I'm going to be presenting. And it helps me if I know there's more people. And second, we get much better questions the more people that are there. So that's the extra credit. So 15 points. And then one thing that I've been reflecting on, what would you do if you had more faith? And I watched a little video about this. And this woman, I don't know who she was, but she said, Michelle, if I had more faith, I would be more fearless. That's really cool. Just try things and know that everything would work out. So I love that. And then finally, remember, as we're trying to defeat mediocrity in the important parts of our life, remember Jesus received not of the fullness at first, but continued from grace to grace. I'm not sure exactly what that means and how he progressed, but he did have to learn, and we know that. And then he progressed from grace to grace, and so do we. So I am thankful that he's the example, and then he can help us overcome that mediocrity. All right, so what questions do you have, if any, this week? Definitely going to be an easier week compared to last week, and no spreadsheet work, which is, I'm sure, fabulous. I love creating the spreadsheets, but I'll have to take a break this week. Yes, Pam.
I got a question.
Uh-huh.
So when they're doing these inside business entrepreneurial things, what's the end game? I mean, like we had talked about in another case study, how they would start something because they wanted to grow it enough so that they could have an IPO and it would spin off. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? And it would be like its own thing, but it's still under the parent company. But this doesn't seem like they're doing that.
No, they're just, I mean, at the end of the day, they're trying to make money. That's what they're trying to do, is grow profit. And when you're a company, especially if you're a public company, everyone wants growth in earnings. If I'm an investor and I'm investing in a company, I want to see a growth in money made. And so they're just looking for more opportunities to make money.
This is just reaching out into another direction, but they're not necessarily going to spin it off. And
no, they may not ever spin it off. They may just keep it inside the company, and it's another source of sales and profit for them. Like Microsoft with the Xbox. If any of you have children that play, the Xbox is expensive and it makes a lot of money for Microsoft on top of Windows and the other things they do. So without that, they would be a much smaller company today. Probably wouldn't even be an independent company anymore. Yeah. So good question.
If I piggyback on that a little bit, I'm just kind of curious with the entrepreneurial spirit. Like, so it seems like they're taking or handpicking executives from their current business to run these new businesses. Is that a common practice, or like, and then if the business fails, do those executives come back, or do they have to replace those executives? Or I guess kind of what's that business or the framework going to look like?
That's a wonderful question, Scott. The most important part of any business is its culture. So if you bring in executives or people to run this business that you have inside your company, there's a huge risk that it won't work because the culture is not the same. The culture is the way that a company does things. And if it's a lot different from that, like Amazon has a certain culture. They work really hard. They work their workers really to the bone, at least according to news reports. They pay them well. So if someone is going to come in and say, another tech executive, hey, we're going to play ping pong half the day, we're going to go off onto offsite things, it just wouldn't work. So generally, companies do use a lot of their own executives to help get this going, or leaders. And that's what Davita did. They used a lot of their own people, but they also used some outside people. But they are very focused on the way they did things. They talk about the team environment. So good question. That's really why a lot of mergers and acquisitions don't work. It's because they can't get the culture to align. It's really tough. When you buy another company, you got to make sure those people buy into how you work.
Well, I was like that Paladina, and then they bought that other group. I
want to say
modern something.
Yeah,
Modern Med, I think.
Yeah.
Modern Med.
Because it was interesting because it seemed like they brought two of their executives, and then they kept a large number of or two of the new groups in and kept a lot of people. But I was just curious, like a lot of times when there's acquisitions or purchases, don't a lot of the executives kind of get pushed out, maybe to the same point, just try to keep culture?
I can't talk to that. I'm not sure what the percentage is, but generally they try to keep the people just because it's easier. It's hard if you let the people go all of a sudden, then you have to fill those spots and you lose a lot of history and how that company runs. Because you still have to, it's not like you cut off immediately. You still have to run that business you bought for a while until you can fully integrate it. A lot of businesses take 18 months to fully integrate.
Okay, I was going to ask, because that's what they did on that Modern Med one, was they said 18 months. And I thought, well, that's kind of a long time, isn't it? But is that normal? That it's that long and you take them? Because I thought for that, they're letting them run. But I think that lost them a lot of money.
Yeah.
In the, they didn't take on their culture. They're trying to, I don't know, merge two different value systems kind of a thing, I think,
Yeah, but it seemed to work out because the head of Modern Med, I think it's the name of it, he actually stayed on after the earnout period, after 18 months, and became a head of sales for the company and for the whole US market. So another way, there's multiple reasons companies buy other companies. In this case, it sounded like they just wanted to buy these clinics and already have them set up instead of trying to establish them themselves.
So, okay, here's a question then, because just even going through school and we talk about monopolies and just having these super companies, if you're buying out your competition and you're taking over these other companies, like, doesn't that start to create more of these monopolies, or is there just a strategic way to do that? Like you only pick certain competition or companies to compete with that you would buy out, or?
Well, there's rules. So larger, that the US government will sue sometimes if they think that I forget what, they have certain limitations on how much a company can own a market, but some monopolies are allowed, like utilities. Electric companies in a lot of states are monopolies where they're located. Where I live, there's a monopoly of two companies, utility companies. So so monopolies aren't great for consumers necessarily, but they're great for those companies that are monopolies. I had a business school professor that said, your goal as a business should become monopoly at some point, where customers have to go to you because you're the best option by far. Not to be malevolent, but you can just go and
So like the motivation of buying other companies is either to remove competition or to grab some of the resources, or so you don't have to create your own
Yeah.
products. Okay.
But it's so hard. When you buy another company, it's a pain. I was at Chevron, and every year and a half, 2 years, we would buy a small oil and gas company, which is great for the small, because we would buy it for the resources where the oil and gas is being drilled, not necessarily for the people, but integrating the systems and the technology was so painful and distracting. It was a lot of hard work. So,
Well, it was interesting, like just because they, like the pharmacy, they wanted to go into the medicine, but they had to buy a pharmacy so they get the pharmacy's.
oh yeah,
certificate.
so they get the license to.
The license, yeah. So I mean, it looks like they bought a company so they could sidestep a lot of that hassle.
And it seems like, yeah, that was just one. It sounded like it was an easy thing for them to do. And it sounds like they're good at it. It sounds like DaVita, that's one of the things they're good at, is acquiring other companies.
Well, it kind of seemed like the Paladina thing was kind of just their solution to their own, employee insurance
Yeah.
problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they were saying, insurance prices keep going up. So they're like, well, we're just going to start our own thing. And then all their employees are enrolled in it. So like, that's the perfect testing ground, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to work because they're all enrolled in it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard to say it was going to be, really profitable right away because it wasn't standing by itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. There's a good point. We use a lot of technology, or some of the technology we use were from companies that started it internally and then grew it. Like, let's see, I have one that I'm looking it up right now. Slack. There we go. So there's this internal text messaging system we use in my company called Slack, and it was actually the company that created it. They created it for their own internal communication because they wanted to have a way for all their computer programmers to talk to one another. And then they realized other companies saw it and liked it that they were working with, and they ended up selling it. And they became moving. They used to be a game company and turned into this company called Skype, which does internal message boards for companies. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff to do it. I would love my employees are pretty good about it, coming up with new ideas and something different that we can do. Amazon has web services, Amazon Web Services, which is just AWS, which is cloud computing for companies. And it's completely different from what you think Amazon is, which is selling stuff. But they created AWS because they needed it, and now they started selling it to other companies, Amazon Web Services. We covered it in one case. I think it was Dropbox, I think, that used AWS. So another example of a company just internally using something and then selling it.
Okay, so I have to ask, what was your opinion about the agribusiness and all the corruption, and what do you even do with all that?
Oh, it's terrible. It's kind of hard to read, right? And the culture and the way things work, and I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, for the exercise, you have to say something like, how would you make this work? And I'm like, I wouldn't make it work. I'd get out of that country. I'd be out of there, that kind of thing.
Oh, it's so tough when there's corruption in a country. It's really, really rough.
And then like in our group meeting, we talked about, well, okay, so we joined their culture. We also go to the dark side, and then it kind of worked. But nobody would do it.
Maybe, yeah, maybe that's what you did. Like in the case essay that you all had with Carbon 6, bring in Daniel and Heather into the company. But I would have loved for them to, one option they could have done is not use the agents at all in the project Agrinova. That was one thing they thought about, just connecting farmers with the wholesalers, but they didn't talk about it. But there would be so many issues because it's so corrupt. The agents would have just made the system unbearable because their jobs would go away.
Yeah, they had a paragraph about that they had thought about that, and then they said, okay, that wouldn't work. That might go violent. So
yep. Yeah, it wouldn't. Yeah, so yeah, it's too bad. It's really corruption. It's terrible.
Yeah, I
That would
thought
be
with
hard
that,
though.
it would be, because that's what I was thinking. If they have that, what are their options really? I mean, you don't know who you can trust out there. And it's, you
Yeah.
know, you got something that works for the farmers, but that's taken a lot of things from everybody
Well, I
else.
love how they're trying to make it not get the information out there, make it more transparent. So that's one way to beat corruption, is just make all the information available. So I like what they're trying to do that way.
It would be hard to go that far down the road and see that they could make a difference, only to say, yeah, but it's not profitable, so we're walking away. That would
Yeah.
just be hard.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened. They did make it successful, and they're rolling it out to other countries. So
What?
it became
Really?
very, very, very successful internally and helped a lot of farmers. So
That's amazing.
yeah, it ended up working. I looked it up a little bit. They renamed it and things, but yeah, they're trying. I don't know how it's gone in other countries, but they're trying the same thing. So
Yeah, we had
Oh, good
another
for them.
angle that would work, but it wasn't the option, you know, that they gave us. So
yeah. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoy the cases this week. It's a little lighter this week, so hopefully you can enjoy some time with your families and loved ones. So.
And
All
thank
right.
you for doing Thanksgiving, giving us that week off of the group.
Oh
I
yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
that.
yes.
That'll be
That's-
nice. You still have the case preps, but at least in the group discussions you don't have. So.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.